The Trump administration has announced withdrawal from dozens of international bodies, many of them linked directly to the United Nations. President Trump has signed an executive order suspending U.S. support for 66 international organizations.
In a move that has sent shockwaves across global politics, Donald Trump has announced that the United States is pulling out of 66 international bodies. The decision, revealed as part of a broader policy reset, is being described by analysts as one of the most aggressive shifts in U.S. foreign engagement in decades. According to the announcement, these exits include a wide range of global organizations involved in health, education, climate, labor, culture, and multilateral cooperation. The message from Trump's camp is clear. The United States should no longer fund or participate in institutions that, in their view, do not directly serve American interests. Supporters are calling it a bold move toward national sovereignty. Critics are calling it isolationism. The timing of this decision is important. The world is already dealing with geopolitical tensions, economic uncertainty, and fragile alliances. Against this backdrop, pulling out of dozens of global bodies signals a dramatic redefinition of how the U.S. sees its role on the world stage. Trump's argument centers on money and control. He has repeatedly claimed that the U.S. pays billions into international systems while receiving little in return. In his words, these organizations, quote, take advantage of American funding while pushing agendas the U.S. does not fully control. This isn't the first time Trump has taken this position. During his earlier presidency, the U.S. withdrew from several major international agreements and institutions. But pulling out of 66 bodies at once marks a much larger and more coordinated effort. What's striking is the scale. These organizations aren't just symbolic. Many of them influence global standards, crisis response, research collaboration, and diplomatic coordination. Exiting them doesn't just change U.S. policy, it reshapes how the rest of the world interacts with Washington. International reactions have been swift. Some allies have expressed concern, warning that reduced U.S. participation could weaken global cooperation. Others are already discussing how to fill the leadership vacuum left behind. Inside the U.S., the reaction is sharply divided. Supporters see this as reclaiming independence and reducing wasteful spending. Opponents warn it could isolate America, reduce its influence, and allow rival powers to step in. At this stage, one thing is certain. This decision is not just about paperwork or memberships. It represents a deeper shift in how the United States defines leadership, responsibility, and power in a changing world. And this is only the beginning. As more details emerged, it became clear that this decision was not sudden. According to people close to the policy rollout, Trump's team had been reviewing U.S. participation in international organizations for months. The goal, they say, was to identify groups that either conflicted with U.S. policy priorities or required large financial contributions with limited direct benefit. Officials aligned with Trump argue that many of these global bodies have drifted away from their original missions. They claim some organizations have become politically biased, inefficient, or overly influenced by countries that do not share American values. From their perspective, continued participation only weakens U.S. leverage. The withdrawal list reportedly includes organizations tied to climate initiatives, labor standards, cultural programs, and development frameworks. While not all names were released at once, the sheer number, 66, has amplified the impact of the announcement. Experts say this move sends a strong signal to both allies and rivals. For allies, it raises questions about reliability and long-term cooperation. For rivals, it opens space to expand influence in institutions the U.S. is leaving behind. Diplomats in Europe and Asia have already expressed concern behind closed doors. Some fear that without U.S. involvement, standards on trade, technology, and human rights could shift in ways that disadvantage American businesses and interests over time. At the same time, countries like China and Russia are being closely watched. Analysts note that when the U.S. steps back from multilateral institutions, other powers often step forward, shaping rules and narratives narratives in their favor. Inside Washington, lawmakers are divided. Some Republicans praise the move as long overdue, arguing that global institutions have limited accountability and drain taxpayer money. Many Democrats, however, warn that walking away reduces U.S. influence without solving underlying problems. Public reaction is mixed but intense. Supporters frame the decision as America first in action. Critics warn that disengagement could weaken global stability, making crises harder to manage when cooperation is needed most. What makes this moment different from past withdrawals is its scale and coordination. Instead of exiting one agreement at a time, this move reshapes the entire structure of U.S. global engagement in one stroke, and the world is now watching closely to see what comes next. As reactions continued to pour in, attention shifted to the practical consequences of this decision. Pulling out of 66 global bodies doesn't just change headlines, it changes how international systems function on a daily basis. Many of these organizations rely heavily on U.S. funding, expertise, and leadership. Without that support, programs related to global health monitoring, disaster response coordination, education initiatives, and labor protections could face serious slowdowns or restructuring. Officials within some of these bodies have already acknowledged that budgets and operations may need to be revised. Former U.S. diplomats have warned that influence is not something a country can pause and restart easily. When a seat at the table is left empty, others move in. They argue that even flawed institutions provide platforms for shaping outcomes, and abandoning them removes leverage rather than increasing it. Trump supporters reject that view. They argue that true leverage comes from strength, not participation. According to them, the U.S. has spent decades compromising inside international systems that restrict its freedom to act. Leaving, they say, allows America to negotiate from a position of independence rather than obligation. This difference in philosophy is at the core of the debate. One side believes leadership means engagement and shaping rules from within. The other believes leadership means refusing to be bound by systems that limit national control. The business community is also paying attention. Some corporate leaders worry that reduced U.S. presence in global regulatory bodies could eventually affect trade standards, technology norms, and market access. Others see potential benefits if fewer international regulations translate into lower compliance costs. On the global stage, uncertainty is growing. Allies are quietly discussing contingency plans. Some are exploring stronger regional cooperation without U.S. involvement, while others hope future administrations could reverse course. What's clear is that this decision has shifted the conversation. The question is no longer whether the U.S. should reform global institutions, it's whether the U.S. should be part of them at all. This marks a turning point in how American power is exercised, not through leadership within systems, but through deliberate distance from them. And with that shift, the world is entering unfamiliar territory. As the story develops, the long-term implications are becoming the focus of debate. Analysts say the real impact of withdrawing from 66 global bodies won't be felt immediately, but over time as international decisions move forward without U.S. input. One major concern is crisis response. Global emergencies, whether pandemics, climate disasters, or economic shocks, are often handled through multilateral coordination. Without formal participation, the U.S. may find itself responding after decisions are already made, rather than helping shape them from the start. Trump's allies argue that this is a calculated risk. They say the United States has the resources, technology, and influence to act independently when needed. From their perspective, global bodies slow decision-making and dilute national priorities. They believe bilateral deals and direct direct negotiations are more effective than large bureaucratic institutions. Critics counter that global influence isn't just about power, it's about presence. They warn that absence creates space for other countries to define norms, standards, and alliances that may not align with U.S. interests in the future. Once those systems are established, re-entry becomes difficult. The political impact at home is also significant. This decision reinforces a clear divide in how Americans view the country's role in the world. For some voters, it represents strength and independence. For others, it raises fears of isolation and reduced global leadership. Internationally, governments are adjusting their expectations. Some allies are choosing to stay quiet publicly while reassessing their strategic partnerships. Others are openly questioning whether long-standing alliances can remain stable if U.S. engagement continues to shrink. What happens next will depend on follow-through. Will these withdrawals be permanent or used as leverage to renegotiate terms? Will future administrations reverse course or build on this approach? Those answers are still unclear. What is clear is that this move has changed the global conversation. It signals that the United States is willing to step back from systems it once helped build and force the world to adapt. Whether this decision strengthens America or limits its influence will be debated for years. But tonight, one thing is undeniable. The rules of U.S. global engagement are being rewritten.